I'd like to welcome members of the committee, officers, and particularly members of the public this morning. Thank you all for coming today. This meeting is being webcast, so smile, you're on camera. First bit of business is I need to outline the emergency evacuation procedure. In the event of the alarm sounding again, please leave the room calmly via the lobby area and the main front door of City Hall, which you've all just come in through. Then turn right and walk down the ramp towards the cathedral. And there's an assembly point in front of the cathedral. Okay. The second item on our agenda is apologies for absence and substitutions. We've received apologies from Councillor Paul Goggin, with Kerry Bales attending as substitute, and from Councillor Jerome Thomas, with Councillor Ellie Freeman as substitute. Are there any further apologies or substitutions? Okay, thank you very much, Zoe. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. Members of the committee, do you have any interest to declare in relation to any of the items of business on the agenda? Okay. Great. Agenda item 4 then is minutes of the previous meeting. There are 2 sets of minutes to be approved today. These are from the meetings held on the 1st of November and on the 13th of December 2024. If it's all right, I'm going to move those both together as a correct record. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Rich. Thank you. Committee, are you content to confirm both sets of minutes as a correct record to be signed by the Chair? Aye. Thank you. Then I can confirm that those are recorded as correct. Agenda item 5 is Chair's announcements. I don't currently have any announcements to make because I'd like to move on as swiftly as we can to our next item, which is public forum. We have 30 minutes allowed for public forum. So with thanks to everyone in the public gallery for coming this morning, we'll try and work through our questions and statements as speedily as we can, so that we can get to as many people as possible today. I do want to mention to those of you who've come as residents who live nearby the Downs, that the Councillor Eddie and I have been in conversations with the Sneyd Park Residents Association so that we can come and attend a public meeting to talk about the issues that we're going to be discussing this morning. So if you don't get the opportunity to speak today, you should still get the opportunity to speak to Richard and I in public at that forum. Thank you. So the questions and replies have been circulated to committee members and published on our website in advance of the meeting. And questioners should have received written answers to their questions last night as well. The way this works is that each questioner is permitted to ask up to 2 supplementary questions if they wish. Supplementary questions must arise directly out of the original question or the reply, so entirely fresh questions on other subjects aren't permitted. And depending on the content of the supplementary questions, it may be necessary for a follow-up reply to be sent to the questioner. What I propose to do is to work through the people who have indicated to us that they will be attending in person, and I will ask first of all if you need me to repeat the written answer to the question before we move on to any supplementary questions you may have. We have received 28 public questions for the meeting. 3 questions were subsequently withdrawn. And we've received 177 public statements for this meeting. Now, of those 177 statements, 171 were about vehicle dwellers. So this is clearly a topic of great public interest. We'll try and get through as many questions and statements as we can today. I'm going to ask if questioners and people making statements can be as brief as possible to give opportunities for as many people as we can to speak. So let's begin with our questions. And our first questions were received from Anne Bragg. Anne, are you here? Wonderful. Hello, Anne. Nice to see you. So, Anne, you have the opportunity for 2 supplementary questions. Would you like me to repeat the written answers that you received to your initial questions first?
Yes, I've only got the one.
Okay, thank you.
Really follow up on the first question I asked about the urinating in public.
Mm-hmm.
In your answer to my question, it was stated that we should try and get proof of people urinating against the walls and doing other business in the bushes. We're elderly people, and quite honestly, some of the people are a bit iffy, and I wouldn't like to go out with a camera at my age and take photographs of people, even though they have been witnessed by some of our residents.
Yeah, I appreciate that can be difficult. I think, I think there's always challenges in being able to report issues like this to the council. It can be quite difficult to sort of provide evidence, as you said. I think, though, that it's probably worth saying that we do have we have civil enforcement officers, we have members of our neighbourhood enforcement team who do patrol around the city, and I think even if you're unable to provide photographic evidence or anything like that, our officers will still take action based on any evidence or suspicions that you can provide. Thank you. Thanks very much, Anne. So we'll move on then next to the next person who's indicated that they will be attending with a question, and that is Councillor John Galandris. And the same question to you, John. Would you like me to read out the answers to your written question first, or would you like to go straight into your supplementary?
I'll go straight in, actually, Barry.
Thank you.
We'll be here for a long time and eat into people's time. I think on my first question, you very kindly indicated that there will be a timetable for action, which is what people want to see. Now, usually in industry, where you set a timetable, you also set hard targets. Mm-hmm. So what I think we'd be expecting to see is hard targets set for the officer cadre, so that what we would see is perhaps we've got 600 van dwellers at the moment, perhaps 500 by the end of 2025, 400 by the end of 2026, 300 by the end of 2027. Are we proposing any such targets?
We're not currently proposing such targets, but what we're trying to do today is we're asking the committee to endorse this new approach to how we work with vehicle dwellers. And so I think as part of developing that work, if the committee agrees to endorse these proposals, then we would be looking at potentially setting some realistic targets for what we might be able to achieve.
Thanks, Mary. I think that's helpful. On the second one, I'm slightly puzzled. I've got my glasses on, so I don't misread anything. I think other local authorities are being more robust. And I'll just quote from Pembrokeshire County Council's website. I can let you have this afterwards. It does say on motorhomes, cooking and sleeping in motorhomes overnight is not permitted. And that was behind my idea of trying to have a census to find out where the van dwellers are from. And I suppose my question is, and I don't know the answer to this, by the way, is if somebody is from another city and has roots and connections with another city, but are now in Bristol, do we have a responsibility to house them?
Our responsibilities under our homelessness duty, which I think is what you're talking about, depend on a number of factors. And one of those factors is having a local connection. So in general, I would say that somebody who is in Bristol who does not have a local connection, whether that's a previous address or something similar, we would not normally have a homelessness duty towards that person, and we would be working with the authorities in their place of origin to ensure that they receive the support that they needed there. Thank you. Thank you very much, John. Our next questioner who's indicated attendance is Paul McGurrell. Paul, are you here? Oh, sorry, Paul. Could you wait until you've got the opportunity to have a microphone handed to you? Not only for the benefit of those here, but also for those watching or listening online. Thank you.
What is to be done by the proliferation of van dwellers on the Downs? The Bristol Downs are getting a reputation for accommodating caravans, and more are appearing. It's getting out of control, and it's very unfair for local residents and visitors to the Downs. They were first on Slip Road at top of Paris Lane, but now there are many on Savile Road, along Westbury Park, and even 3-4 vans on Clay Pit Road. Recently, some are now camped on Ladies Mile and all around Circular Road. There are more and more coming all the time because Bristol City Council's inability to enforce their legal notices are preserving this once beautiful area of Bristol, which historically was to be kept to preserve for the benefit of all the people of Bristol and their visitors. It is very alarming how it's been slowly taken over as a caravan site. The van dwellers throw toilet waste on the grounds, and we believe there is drug taking place. It is a health risk and totally inappropriate for them to live in this area. Really not fair on a law-abiding local community paying their taxes, plus for people to come from miles around to enjoy the leisure time on the Downs. We need Bristol City Council to take control of the situation, to give out a message. It is not acceptable in our city, banning camping around the Downs and moving these vehicles on to appropriate caravan sites that have toilet facilities.
Thank you, Paul. So one thing I would say is that we have acknowledged that the council's current approach towards working with vehicle dwellers isn't any longer sustainable. There has been a very large increase in the number of people living in vehicles in our city, and that's why we're bringing proposals to this committee today. Those proposals have at their core, I think, a concern for the well-being of vehicle dwellers themselves, as well as for neighbouring communities who are impacted by encampments. And our approach is very much led by support. So one of the things that we're looking to do is to support people with routes out of vehicle dwelling into settled accommodation. We're also, though, and this is... Can I? Sorry, I'm not going to accept anyone calling out at the moment. Thank you. We're also, as you will hear, as a result of the great public interest that we've received for this item on our agenda, we're going to be bringing an additional proposal to the committee, which is around how we work with encampments on the highway and what our enforcement policy is towards that. So we hope that this approach will provide better outcomes for vehicle dwellers themselves and for neighbouring communities. Thank you. I'm going to move on now to our next question, and that's Dan Ackroyd. Dan, are you here? Okay. All right, I'm not seeing Dan. So that's the end of our public questioners who have indicated that they will be attending. I'm going to move on now to statements. We've had 9 people indicate that they would like to speak to their statement. I'm going to ask, if possible, if you could confine your remarks to no more than about a minute, so that we can allow as many people as possible to speak. And you can either read from your written statement, or if you prefer, you can speak to it. Either is fine. And we're going to start with the first person on my list, and that is Stephen Small. Stephen, are you here?
Thank you, Councillor Barry, for allowing me to speak. My statement now is separate to the statement I submitted in writing. First, I am pleased to see the matter has finally become an agenda item, which is tremendous news. Secondly, we appreciate this situation was inherited from the previous administration and not of your making. However, residents and council taxpayers have had enough. Surely, in the 21st century, there should be sites for van and caravan dwellers with fresh water, electric, toilets, and with a view to them moving into social housing. The solution really is simple. Invest in more meanwhile sites, ban overnight camping throughout Bristol, and make sure it's enforced. These steps will restore Bristol's beauty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you. The next person that I have on my list is Ian Beattie, MBE. Ian, are you here?
Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. As a rider to the statement by Stephen, obviously I'm sympathetic to those dwellers who clearly can't afford affordable homes, but such dwellers should firstly be registered by the council and be levied an appropriate council tax, which would obviously provide them with a suitable permanent facility in a bespoke area set aside by the council. Now, one of the issues that's clearly at stake is the well-being and the income and expenditure of individuals that are actually resident on the Downs. Each and every home, as far as I can see it, has got an additional motor vehicle to transport them to places of shopping and of work. But I think some assessment needs to be made by the City Council to interview each and every permanent or semi-permanent individual on the Downs or elsewhere to find out what their income is, what their expenditure is, what their personal situation is, so that one can assess the affordability of the individual. Because obviously in developments in the city now, we have got affordable homes. If one thinks about these dwellers, are they a subsidiary affordable home group? I don't know. And in the provision of a site for them to be resident in, one needs to be obviously aware of their cash flow situation, their income and expenditure. I think that's probably all I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beattie. The next person who's indicated that they wish to speak is Mr. Raymond Bright. Mr. Bright, are you here?
Thank you very much. To be fair, most of the points that I was going to raise have already been raised. I do think that you can say that previous council didn't show any responsibility, which they certainly didn't. You are now in charge. You have the responsibility. You can't keep blaming what goes on in the past. You've got to do something now. Now, last night on Savile Road, a caravan was burnt out. So it certainly isn't safe for these people to live that way. I don't know why you don't move these people down to somewhere like Havenmouth on a disused industrial site, there's plenty of them down there. One Green councillor turned around and said, if we move them to Avonmouth, how would they get to work in Bristol? Well, the same as people who live in Avonmouth get to Bristol, in their cars, on the bus, etc., etc. So let's stop putting all these little things up. What's going on in Bristol is not right. I've raised about the human waste and everything, and all I get back is a letter saying, oh, if there's any there, let us know, and we'll come and pick it up. The water authorities are under huge pressure at the moment because of all sewage is going down the drains. I own a motorhome. I love my motorhome. I live in my motorhome when we go away. I've had caravans for many years. I lived in my caravan for 3 months when a house fell through, and I thoroughly enjoyed it on proper sites with water, toilet facilities, and everything else. What's going on out there is wrong. You've got people out there, there's a maths teacher out there, there's a yoga practitioner, there's delivery drivers. One delivery driver in Bristol recently said, and he did, I don't know what you call these delivery things, he was earning £800 a week. And he said he was working 12-hour days. My son's a paramedic. He works 12-hour days. So come on, get your act together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Councillor John Galandris.
Firstly, I'm pleased to see that the committee is addressing the issue of van dwelling after too many years of the council ignoring the problem and simply hoping that it would magically disappear. Allowing people to live in vans in freezing conditions without mains water, flushing toilets and heating facilities is a civic disgrace. At the very least, Bristol should provide proper sites with facilities as a stopgap, with a long-term goal being the provision of social housing. During COVID, the council required all vans to be removed from Bristol's roads. The van dwellers moved to designated sites with facilities. After COVID, the mayor should have grasped this issue and made sure there was no return to people living on the streets of Bristol. Instead, we've seen the number of homeless people living in vans escalate to what are now unsustainable levels. It represents a serious failure of civic leadership, a moral stain on our city. Please do not kick this can down the road again. Please set a clear timetable to eliminating living on the streets of Bristol. Thank you, committee.
Thank you, John. Our next speaker is Jason Smith.
Well, thank you for letting me speak, as with all of us. I must say that what has been said very much covers things that I was prepared to contribute. One thing that I have discovered, my wife looked up online, camping in Bristol. You can actually have a website where you can discover a place to camp. You're very welcome to come to Clifton Downs, free parking for overnight camping. The issue is more than just a local residential thing. It's coming from outside the area, and as has already been said, the situation has escalated through inaction. When there is a vacuum, it always gets filled. And so I am, like my colleagues here, very pleased to hear that the council are going to start to address this firmly, and I think it really does need firm action. I am not unsympathetic to the position of those people in the caravans, and as has already been said, and was said at the last mayoral council meeting before he moved on. The health situation of those people in residence is appalling. I mean, they suffer lots of physical and mental health issues, and staying in the vans that they have is not doing them any good whatsoever. So thank you very much for taking a serious look at this, and we want to, as has already been said, see action taken as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Our next speaker is Paul McGurrell. Okay, thank you very much. So, let's see, who do we have next? Looking through my list. The next speaker is James Bailey. Is James here? James.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I did send through a far longer statement, so I've shortened this for the purposes of the meeting. I've put each point under a title. First one being waste, sanitary products, faeces and drug paraphernalia. I must note that I believe by number of feet or metres, I'm the closest house to van dwellers, certainly on Savile Road. The finding of such items is very common by our household specifically and all along this road. Human excrement in trees, bushes and poured down the drains next to my front door. I see this regularly. My 4-year-old, let alone the 3-month-old, isn't allowed to touch anything beyond our gate for fear of what she might find. She has, this is Florence, inadvertently picked up tampons, drug baggies, and seen a lot more, including syringes, next to the Grange. It's disgraceful now. Our residential bins are used for human waste, as are the dog bins and the bins on the downs. Local laws, they are totally flaunted. We have a 2-tier system where people that rightly abide by the laws, pay the taxes and want to keep our downs and our city the way it should be, are treated completely differently to the people that flaunt the law, i.e. people that park on the grass and or next to signs that specifically say you can't. In a country and a world of laws, how do you expect law-abiding people to continue abiding the law? And I'm not talking about us in this room, but onlookers seeing laws totally flaunted. How can this continue is my point. It's just utterly unbelievable. Fly tipping. Fly tipping by van dwellers is absolutely rife, but over the last 3 years, people have just simply joined in. We all know rubbish attracts rubbish, waste attracts waste, and it's getting to a point where I personally and my neighbours cannot pick up any more, and that includes smashed up pallets, bags of sanitary ware, and certainly if you live on Savile Road with the prevailing wind, it blows at our houses. You see where it comes from because it's around vans and it blows to us. I mean, it's got to a point where it's filthy and it's dangerous. Access for emergency vehicles. And I have to talk locally to where I am, but I know this is widespread. It's become so dangerous. Let's talk about Savile Manor, which is the care home. When the cars overflow from Savile Road to Wills Lane, Hollybush Lane, and the Horseshoe by Savile Manor, fire engines cannot get in. Ambulances also often can't get in and have to park on the road and thus blocking the road. And I know this because I see it probably once a week. The ambulances have to come and go from that care home. You know, there's one there yesterday, there's one there 2 days ago, there's one 2 there last week, and they can't get through. Now, safety in fire. Vans gas canisters are roadside and discarded after use, let alone left inside and used. Log burners in vans and caravans are commonplace because I see and can smell them every single night. Pallets are actively being smashed up and burnt on the downs and in vehicles. Now there is a particular van with a Home Office in it who's used one of the other abandoned vans as his pallet store. I'll get on to abandoned vehicles. Last night at about 11 p.m. there was an explosion outside my house whilst I was trying to get my little girl to bed. I went straight out to call the fire brigade. There was police already there, and they told me they just happened to be passing. The preceding 35 minutes, whilst they were trying to put the fire out, 3 more gas canisters exploded. There's been crowds of people. There's a police cordon around it today. The wind was blowing the embers into the trees in front of Savile Manor and onto my roof. Now, I was fearful, not for me or not for my wife, but the little infant upstairs and my little girl trying to get to sleep. If this isn't a wake-up call, then I really don't know what is. Illicit activity.
Sorry, Mr. Bailey, can I ask you to wrap
I
up
will
now?
speed this up.
Thank you. So we do have another person who wants to speak.
Certain have a steady flow of people in and out. We see it at night. I see it because I can see it. It's 100 metres from my windows. Some of the vans are dropped off at night. The licence plates are taken off. We have approached these people, but the reactions we get are not something us residents want to have to deal with.
Yeah. Mr. Bailey, thank you very much. You've spoken very movingly, but I do wish to. Thank you. I do apologise for cutting you off, but let's if you're able to speak to our officers, we can arrange for that to happen. I'm going to move on now to apologies if I get your name wrong, but I'm going to move on to Mrs. Joran Baines. Is Mrs. Baines here? Doesn't look like it. I may have interrupted you without need then in that case, Mr. Bailey, because I don't have anybody else. A very short statement. You demonstrated in the report. Hold on a minute. I'm sorry. Hold on. Can I have hands, please? I only have a couple of minutes left for public forum, I'm afraid. So can I please have hands from anyone who's indicated that they wish to speak but hasn't yet spoken? So we've got the gentleman at the back, and I've got Henry. Is there anybody else? Another gentleman there. Okay. So I'm gonna start with the person in the blue shirt, and then I'm gonna go to Henry, and then I think we'll have to wrap up. And if you could keep your contributions to no more than a minute, that would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm going to start with a few quotes from the report that I'm here to observe for your discussion of. The Council supports communities who are disproportionately affected by imprisonment. That sounds like criminals. So we have these communities more vulnerable to imprisonment. It is crucial we continue to support these people across Bristol, meeting the varied needs of citizens who cannot afford accommodation. Vehicle dwellers are citizens and need to be respected and represented with equal access to services. Well, yeah, equal access to services if you pay or you don't pay. You talk about in the report the positives of knowing that they can go to bed at night and not have someone break in. Well, how about my wish to go to bed at night and not have someone break in, not have exploding gas bottles outside my house? You say in your report, we must ensure that we give equal focus to all. well, at the moment, I don't feel equally focused on. I feel that I pay £100 a week for the privilege of having someone write a report wanting equal respect for criminals and taxpayers, for people who defecate and leave drug paraphernalia across the Downs, and people that pay for it to be maintained well. No longer. I withdraw my consent, I withdraw my council tax, I will not fund people who hate me.
Thank you. And so that we can give an accurate record in our minutes, can I ask your name, please?
My name is William Barnes. You can find me
Thank
on
you.
williambbarnes.uk.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So I have two more people who've indicated that they wish to speak. I'm going to go to Henry next.
Thank you, Chair.
And again,
it's good. I'm pleased to see the committee finally discussing this. The Downs is a jewel in the crown of Bristol's open green spaces and must be protected at all costs. Although the community and my constituents sympathise with the situation, the Downs is not the right place for a vehicle dweller encampment. It is unacceptable of the amounts of fly tipping, waste and antisocial behaviour that is happening in the encampment. The council and previous administration have failed time and time again to get a grip on the situation. And the situation will only get worse. We've heard from people here today, that gas canisters were exploding last night. Imagine if we had a hot, dry summer. Imagine if these gas canisters were near the rows upon rows of caravans and they all blew up. Think of the consequences. They would have been absolutely devastating. I implore the committee and the council to do something about this, because heed my warning. If something isn't done, it's only going to get worse and it could have tragic consequences. Thank you.
thank you, Henry. And our last indicated speaker is the gentleman in the blue sweater at the back. Could you let us know your name before you speak, please? Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. My name is Peter Weeks. My statement is number 152 or 156, I can't remember, on the list. May I give you some statistics? On Monday morning, I cycled round the Downs with my wife early, down all the roads, up and down all the roads, counting the vans and caravans. So we went along Rockleys, Ivywold Road, Circular Road, Ladies Mile, Stoke Road, Roman Road, down Westbury Park, Parry's Lane and back along Savile Road. We counted altogether 57 vans and 40 caravans. That's nearly 100 vehicles. The Downs is one of the worst parts of Bristol, but it's not the only part, and the problem, as you know, extends to many other parts of Bristol. So I'm delighted to see that in your proposals we're going to come to later on, that you have some plans to develop permanent sites, and I commend that proposal, and as some of my colleagues have said, I wish you good speed in getting that implemented as quickly as possible. Can I finish by just pointing out the 5-hour parking rule, which is completely ignored. Completely ignored. There are vans that have been there for months, parked right next to a sign that says 5 hours parking, no return within 2 hours. What is the point of having signs with absolutely no enforcement?
Thank you very much. And so that concludes our public forum for this morning. Thank you to members of the public so much for your impassioned and often moving statements and questions. Councillor Eddy and I have agreed that we will be meeting residents in a public meeting, which will be forthcoming. We don't have a date for that yet, but hopefully you'll be advised of that one way or another. Thank you all very much for your attendance. We're going to move on to our next item now, but I've got a hand from Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Chair. obviously, this is we've heard an awful lot of people talking about specifically the Downs this morning. The Downs is not the only place that's affected by traveller populations.
Indeed.
Let's
discuss that as part of the item that we're
would you
covering this
extend
under.
the offer to other parts of the city to meet with other affected populations, resident populations?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you
absolutely.
for that clarification.
I'm always happy to meet members of the public, if people want to get in touch and arrange a meeting with a community organisation or a public meeting in an area of the city to discuss a topic of concern, I'm very happy to do that.
Thank you for your clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let's move on then. Our next agenda item is item 7, and that's homelessness and rough sleeping grants. Now, this report seeks approval to accept and spend Bristol's 2025 to 26 grant allocations for a number of different grant schemes. Those are the Homelessness Prevention Grant, the Rough Sleeping Accommodation Programme, the Single Homelessness Accommodation Programme, and the Rough Sleeping Prevention and Recovery Grant. Taken together, the total allocation for all of these grants is £11,368,664. This is a key decision as the proposal involves spend of more than £500,000 and it affects more than 2 words. Now, as we've heard during public forum and elsewhere, homelessness is a crisis that's affecting every part of our city, every community of our city, and it affects people in many different ways. The reasons why people become homeless are extremely varied, and the ways in which we support people to move on and recover from the traumatic experience that is losing one's home are equally varied. I'm going to invite Paul Sylvester, Head of Housing Options, to introduce and outline the report in a minute. But I'd also like to draw the committee's attention and the public's attention to the very significant work that we're trying to do to prevent people from becoming homeless in the first place, as well as to support them, accommodate them when this awful event happens in people's lives. So I'm going to pass over to Paul now to introduce and outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. Like you say, the report sets out Bristol's homelessness grant allocations for 2026 across 4 different funding streams, and we're seeking approval to spend the grants. The grant funding is used for a wide range of services, and whilst there is a lot of detail in the report, and the committee members have my apologies for that, I thought it would be useful for you to see all of the spend and all of the activity together rather than bring in separate reports. So I'm not going to go through the detail, that's all set out in the report, but I do want to start by giving a bit of context around the grants. Government have funded homelessness services for many years. However, the grants change, the names change, and the priorities of government change, as do allocations. The current funding that we're talking about today is for 1 year only, for 25-26, but you'll be pleased to hear that that doesn't mean the funding is going to end on the 31st of March 26. The reason for the short-term funding is that the government are reviewing their approach to grant allocations for homelessness with a commitment to longer-term funding and a simpler grant allocation process. But what do we know about future funding levels? So what we do know is that the grant funding for homelessness in 25-26 increased by £233 million for English local authorities. And whilst future funding is subject to spending review and nothing is 100% certain, the statements from government are positive around funding for homelessness services and for building new homes. So we are confident in the effectiveness of the services we fund. However, we're going to take the opportunity to review all grant-funded services in the first part of the next financial year, working closely with MHLG partners and stakeholders to refine and develop our grant-funded services to maximise positive outcomes, including the prevention of homelessness and rough sleeping and the reduction of placements in temporary accommodation. So, The grant awards for next year have stayed the same for 3 out of the 4 grants, apart from an increase of 2.3 million in our homelessness prevention grant allocation. The services proposed in 25-26 are mostly a continuation of services funded in previous years, but there are two main proposals that I'd like to draw out. The first one is that the homelessness prevention grant to fund the salary costs of our redesigned housing options service. So this redesign mentioned in previous committees is part of the Tackling Homelessness programme, and the investment in this service will make improvements throughout our client's journey with a focus on prevention, supporting people to move on from temporary accommodation and increasing access to the private rented sector. The second one is for the homelessness prevention grant to contribute to an increased investment in moving more clients into private rented tenancies and increasing our portfolio of private rented leased temporary accommodation, and that's set out in more detail in the next report. There are savings attached to both of these investments that form part of the budget proposal for 25-26, and the positive impact of this investment will mean both fewer people in temporary accommodation and fewer people in unsupported, privately managed temporary accommodation. So in the report, we go through each of the grant funding streams in turn, as the Chair has outlined earlier. But in summary, I just want to finish by saying that we are incredibly proud of the work we do. This is a wide range of interventions delivered by the Council and our partners across the homelessness sector. It is our thoughtful and planned response to the reality that homelessness is both complex and multifaceted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I'd like to echo what Paul said about our pride in the services that we provide. There are, as we said, homelessness, as Paul said, is so multifaceted, and it affects people in so many different ways. And one of the things that I think has come out of the recent inspection by government of our services is that we provide really excellent services to people who become homeless or at risk of becoming homeless, and we do that in a way that is focused on the needs of the person. You know, we see people as individuals and we support them with their individual needs. I'm going to go to Councillor Eddy first.
I know you, Chairman, myself, and I hope all the committee view combating homelessness as the key challenge for this council. In my view, it's the real first curse afflicting Bristol. And since this committee was founded last June, we've had a series of very important, actually, combating homelessness reports, as the Chairman alluded to, which, in my view, go very well towards actually seeking people not being in this situation in the first place. Clearly, the financial and the human challenge is immense. This money is very welcome, and I'm sure it will be used effectively. Can I thank officers for the briefing they provided for members on Tuesday? I found that very helpful. One question I pose then, perhaps Paul can just respond to. I have no doubt we will fully use resources available to us by these 4 grants this year. But are there any key performance indicators which, if we didn't meet, might actually imperil some of the money staying with us?
The key thing that we need to do is comply with our commitments to government around what we're spending the money on. We have regular review meetings with our government advisors, and there's a clear tracking throughout the year, so there's no surprises around any issues. And we certainly intend, like every other year, to spend all of the grant against what we're setting out today. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Richard. Do other members of the committee have any questions that they would like to ask officers? Councillor Stone.
Yeah, I just wanted to just clarify about I mean, majority of this money is going to be 49% of the funding is going to be put on supporting or preventing people from getting into homelessness. I just wanted to ask you, how much of that is going to be spent on training operatives, part of the citizen service centres, to meet those needs, to stop people from getting into homelessness? How much of it is headed towards training and support?
Yep, that's a really good question. I don't have the breakdown now, but I can definitely provide that outside of this meeting. Thank you.
Al, would you like to speak? Okay, thanks. I wasn't sure if you were indicating or not. I've got Zoe and then Sips. Councillor Peake.
I just wanted to know, do we know approximately how many units or additional units this funding will provide, or has that been determined yet? Not sure if I've just missed it.
Just for clarity, do you mean units of accommodation?
Yeah.
Okay, so the two grants that provide additional units of accommodation that are set out in the paper, the single homelessness accommodation programme and the rough sleeping accommodation programme, the details are set out in the paper.
Sorry, just struggling to find the actual, in terms of the RSAP and the SHAP, how many actual new units will be provided? 150 about, isn't it?
Okay, so yeah, a colleague behind me has just confirmed, so we've got 30 Housing First properties and 141 being delivered through our rough sleeping accommodation programme.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Shabalala next.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I would just like to get some better clarification, really, in terms of the excellent report that was done through the accommodation for ex-offenders. Reading the report, Bristol did very well in that pilot and supported about 30 people from that ex-offender background into accommodation, which is really great. Just trying to better understand some of the equalities impact assessment within that, what's been some of the learnings, and what are we doing moving forward in terms of supporting some of those high-risk offenders.
Thank you for the question. So yeah, we very much intend to continue with this initiative. It was a pilot, but it's worked successfully, and not only is it providing people with accommodation, but it's helping people to break the cycle of reoffending, which is great for Bristol. In terms of the detail and the equalities impact, I think we need to come back to you on that. But as alongside, in terms of any additional learning, I'll just speak to my colleagues behind me to see if there's anything else they want to say. Yeah, just building on what the pilot's done already. Yeah, thank you.
And again,
my following that is that in terms of the interventions, such as the clear rent arrears, are we aware of who tends to benefit the most from that, and what preventative measures we are doing to make sure that there's less of that? So whatever the supports or the learnings that you've found, how are you making sure that there's less of that potential of high arrears?
Okay. I think there's a more detailed piece of work to look at who's actually benefiting from that, particularly the rent arrears payments. That's something we'll need to take away.
Okay. My other point, sorry, it's a long report, right? Was really in terms of the staff turnover. So this is not necessarily the joyful kind of work that people do. So really applaud the work that your team does. But it would be really just good to understand the kind of level of staff turnover that you have and the challenges that you may have in terms of those vacancies in order to kind of meet this need.
Yeah, so staff turnover and retention is a key focus of the service at the moment. It's different for different roles. It's slightly higher for people who are dealing on the front line with clients. So we're working very closely with HR, looking at growing our own initiative in terms of bringing people online, developing and training them within the team as a way of sort of our succession planning to improve our filling of vacancies.
Thank you very much.
By saying that, I noted that there's the community-based support, and I'd really be interested in understanding what's your place-based approach in terms of that, because there's some wards with higher needs of rough sleepers, and what those interventions would actually mean. I'd really like to find out a bit more about that at a later point.
Thank you. We can do that.
Thanks. I've got a hand from Councillor Stone, and I think we've got time for one other person to ask a question after that, and then I think we'll have to move on to the report recommendations. So, Councillor Stone and then Councillor Bales.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to really know what are the what's in the pipeline for private rental accommodation that will take on local rental allowances at £1,050 per month for a 2-bed accommodation. Do we have those partnerships that will literally rent out their licensed properties for that local allowance?
I wondered if we could I could answer that with the next paper. We're going to be talking about private renting in a bit more detail. Is that okay? We can pick it up then. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
I do have a second point. My second point very quickly is we need to know where we stand today, and so I just want to know do we know? I'm sure we do. I just want you to confirm it, that we know how many families are living in temporary accommodation. We know what our targets are, and we know how to get there. I just want to be confident that we understand those scenarios.
Absolutely, won't be a surprise to the committee that I look at temporary accommodation every week. It's something that's key to the council in terms of understanding what's going on, and that split between families and singles, different types of TA they're in. We're all over that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Bales next.
I was just looking at the home choice banding system, and obviously anyone who fits that criteria can go onto that banding, including street homeless people. But I've done outreach with street homeless people, and it's very difficult for them to connect to the internet because you have to bid online. And I know some of them go to the library, they connect to the buses. But how are we ensuring that they get fair opportunity to bid on properties? Because if you don't bid it every week, it's really difficult for you to get on the housing ladder, even if it's social housing. So is the system really that fair?
Yep, it's a good question. We're always very mindful of digital exclusion, so we commission services, work directly with people that are rough sleeping, and we'll put in place whatever measures are needed to ensure that people can access services like home choice.
Thanks very much. We've got time for one very brief question from Councillor Stone.
I was just going to say, to answer that question, there is something called digital inclusion, which is run by Bristol Waste. They will provide handsets, mobile phones for people who are homeless, etc., etc. So if they go and ask at any of the food banks, then Bristol Waste can provide even laptops and cards as well. So sort of data cards for people who are homeless. So please use that service.
Yeah. Thanks very much. And yeah, I mean, when I've been out with the street outreach teams from St Mungo's, one of the things that they're able to do is to provide people who are sleeping rough with a mobile phone, so they have access to telephony and those sorts of things. Right, let's move on then to the recommendations of this report. I think I should say that as Paul's indicated, we're hearing from national government some encouraging things about support for homelessness services, and we're looking forward to a strategic review from MHCLG later this year. What I've proposed is that as part of our own strategic approach to how we make best use of our funding for homelessness and how we provide best possible outcomes for people, that this committee should set up a task group later this year to look at the whole range of our homelessness services. That said, I think that the recommendations in this report are excellent. I think it's an extremely thorough set of recommendations for how we make best use of those scarce funds and how we support people who are at risk or experiencing homelessness. I'm going to, for the clarity of the committee and for the benefit of members of the public, read out the recommendations for the report first of all. Those are that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery approves the report, and there are contractual recommendations as part of that. I'm going to read those out. Number 1, authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee to enter into a grant agreement / memorandum of understanding and take all steps required to accept and spend the Homelessness Prevention Grant, the HPG, the Rough Sleeping Accommodation Programme, the RSAP or RSAP, the Single Homelessness Accommodation Programme or SHAP, and the Rough Sleeping Prevention and Recovery Grant, which is the RSP and RG. Government really does love its acronyms. The funding for 25 to 26, as outlined in the report, including procuring and awarding contracts which may be over £500,000 in line with the procurement routes and match them in budget envelopes set out in this report. Number 2, that the committee authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, to invoke any subsequent extensions or variations specifically defined in the contracts being awarded up to the maximum budget envelope outlined in this report. And 3, that the committee authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, I think that's the last time I need to say that in this particular report, to bid for future funding from the Single Homelessness Accommodation Programme, and if successful, to accept and spend the funding which may be over the key decision threshold. So I move those report recommendations, and I'd like a seconder, please. Councillor Eddy, thank you. Do we need to have any further discussion on the recommendations of those reports before we move to a vote? I'm not seeing any hands, so that's great. We'll move now to a vote on this report. Can I ask members to clearly indicate your vote by hand? First of all, can I ask for votes for the recommendations? And that's unanimous, I think. Yep, great. Fantastic. So that vote was unanimous, and so those recommendations passed. Thank you very much. We're going to move on now to agenda item 8, which is approval for activities to support homeless households to maintain and secure private tenancies. So as Paul indicated earlier, this is intimately related to the homelessness prevention work that we were discussing earlier. This report seeks approval to spend up to £3,493,365 gross per annum on activities to support homeless households into private rented tenancies and supply more cost-effective temporary accommodation, including landlord incentives and the procurement of a financial services and debt recovery function. This is a spend-to-save proposal with an expected net cost of £2,388,380 and gross savings of £3,953,175. And then this report seeks approval to procure Great Western Credit Union to deliver administration of financial support and a recovery service. Now, this is a key decision as the proposal involves spending more than £500,000 and it affects more than 2 wards. So one of the things I'd really like to highlight about this work is that homelessness prevention and supporting homeless households is one area where the council's financial interest is very much aligned with providing better outcomes for people. So we're in a way we're fortunate in that this is a spend to save proposal. This will save the council money, but it will also, as we'll hear, support households into being able to secure and maintain private tenancies that they can manage themselves, and that they can live in conditions that suit them and that they choose. So With that, I'd like to hand over to Paul again to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you, Chair. So, with 22,000 households on the housing register for social housing, 6,500 homelessness presentations a year, 1,700 households in temporary accommodation, and only 1,500 social housing lettings, we need to use the private rented sector to meet the needs of homeless households that are homeless and reduce our reliance on temporary accommodation. It is common practice for local authorities to work with the private rented sector, and within Bristol our aim is to support clients to move into good quality accommodation. To do this, we do a few things. We inspect properties to ensure that the standard of accommodation is good and that it's compliant with rental safety regulations. We ensure that there is no record of the landlord being unfit, make sure that they are good landlords. We collect legal safety certificates and document the landlord as evidence of legal compliance with any regulations. So funding is needed to support more people into the private rented sector and secure rents at affordable local housing allowance levels. So it isn't free, but it is significantly cheaper than having households in temporary accommodation, and it's a lot better for the people concerned. One of the main barriers to accessing private rented accommodation is having the cash for rent in advance and a deposit, and that's where our contract with the credit union comes in and the interest-free loans that we give to clients. Funding is also needed to increase our portfolio of leased temporary accommodation. Again, this isn't cost neutral, but it is cheaper than other types of TA through our emergency accommodation framework. And as part of the housing options redesign, which I mentioned earlier, we have recruited additional lettings negotiators to work in our private renting team, many having worked in letting agencies in Bristol previously. So with this additional resource and the funding that we're asking for, our aim is to increase our lease portfolio and placements in private rented as set out in the table in paragraph 48. The financials relating to this is set out in paragraph 37, with a total net cost avoidance of 1.5 million per year. So it's 1.5 million cheaper than having clients in emergency accommodation framework properties. Built into the cost and the new contract we're proposing with the credit union is a minimum recovery rate of 60%. So I'm drawing your attention to this because it is the absolute minimum acceptable, and we are reviewing how we work alongside the credit union are committed to increase recovery rates, which will also improve the financial position set out in this report. And finally, I just wanted to say that the private rented sector, the market is changing, and there are significant changes on the horizon with the Renters' Rights Bill. We are working with colleagues, including Tom Gilchrist and his private housing service and others, to plan for these changes, to capitalise on the benefits, and there will be benefits, and to implement mitigations to deal with any potential negative effects. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. We're going to have a short time for comments and questions from members then, and I'm going to start with Councillor Clark.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just think I wanted to say something, just put this in context, particularly for members of the public, because we are having more and more briefings prior to this meeting. Yeah. And I think it's really important that members of the public know, not that we're having backroom meetings, that we're having an opportunity, because these are such complex issues, that to deal with it, basically a meeting could take up a single issue. We know that. So I think it's really important that members of the public are aware of that. So we haven't rehearsed this meeting in advance, but the fact that there may not be as many questions coming forward as members of the public would have anticipated is because we have had sight of this report. We've had an opportunity to hear the context from officers, and I think that we just really need to be aware of that these days. And I think that this is possibly a trend that we're going to be seeing more and more. Not that I want more meetings, I have to tell you that in public, but I think it's because these issues are complex and really significant that we're having this positive opportunity to really have a look at these things, but it may look that we're not either one disinterested or that we are not engaged with the subject, and that's not the case. And I just really wanted to say that at this point. Thank you.
That's a really good point, Joss. Yeah, I think that's it is something that's worth sort of sharing with the public, and I think reflecting on as well that one of the things that I'm really pleased about is that I think the members of this committee over the last few months have had the opportunity to sort of collectively improve our knowledge and understanding of the issues that we're facing, and to have briefings and in-depth conversations with officers. That really means that that collectively, I think we now even more than before bring an awful lot of knowledge and expertise really to the discussions that we're having, and I think that's something to be celebrated. And yes, we do have regular briefings, and in particular we will have briefings in advance of our committee meetings on complex items such as this one. What that means is actually that we have the opportunity to get through the business in the time that we have available to us, which is not long. We have a number of key decisions to make today, and I think those pre-briefings give us the opportunity to actually to work through what we need to do, the decisions that we need to make constitutionally in order to support the functioning of the council. So yeah, I think that's a really key point. I'm going to go to Richard, then to Ellie, and then to...
I'm getting increasingly concerned that serendipity is linking Councillor Clark and myself, because what she said is probably something I wanted to say. Can I also use this chance just to correct my previous statement, contribution? I commented that we'd had the grants briefing on Tuesday. It wasn't, it was last week. We had this one on Tuesday, but that actually answered many of my questions, like Joss, of course. And again, my congratulations to the officers, because as Paul is always keen to say, actually working closely with the private rental sector is important at actually not just deferring but preventing homelessness. One thing I would say, just caution, whilst I'm sure their intentions are positive, I do gravely fear that certain actions of the present government is going to lead to a reduction in the private rental sector, as people say, what's the point of actually staying there? Wouldn't we be better selling property instead? And that is the fear. We should actually obviously work with the private sector to ensure that rental standards are high, and we certainly expose and enforce against ruckman landlords. But of course, we do need to actually support and encourage this sector.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eddy. And yeah, I think it's probably worth saying, I think, that our officers are working to particularly to understand the likely impact of the Renters' Rights Bill when it passes, and colleagues in our housing option services and in our private housing teams are working together really to understand what the impact of that is likely to be. I think, not to put words in officers' mouths, but I think there's likely to be positive impacts from that, but also potentially some negative impacts, especially in the short term, which we'll need to manage carefully. Is there anything that you'd like to add on that, Paul?
No, I think we're broadly positive with the recommendations. We like the fact that people have greater security in their private rented properties. We do believe that there may be some short-term impacts we've got to mitigate. Thanks.
Thanks very much. So I've got Councillor Freeman next, and then we've got Councillor Bales, and then I think we'll have to finish with Councillor Stone because we are quite short of time.
Apologies. And having said all that about how well prepared you are, I am subbing in today, so I haven't had some of that. So you may have already discussed this. I just wanted to understand a bit more about the debt recovery function. We've obviously, heard lots of concerns about bailiffs and people feeling that I'd be treated unfairly. I just wanted to understand a bit more about our control of that, and I suppose our oversight of that, to make sure that we are confident that tenants are being treated fairly.
Right, yeah. So the Great Western Credit Union carry out the debt recovery on our behalf, and for the loans that they make. They're an ethical lender, something that is an organisation that the City Council supports, and don't use bailiffs. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Councillor Bales next.
I wanted to ask if this scheme is like triaged in any way, because we don't want to end up setting tenants up to fail. So is it an option for everybody on the housing register or only certain people? Because if you're somebody that's prone to getting into debt and then you're taking out a loan from the credit union and you're being put in private rented accommodation, that could be potentially why you've become homeless. So just making sure we're not setting them up to fail.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things with that. So supporting people into the private rented sector is ring fence for households in Bristol who are threatened with homelessness, who have met the conditions of us providing them with support. It is an offer that's open to anybody, whether they meet our priority need categories. It's a really good offer for single people who aren't vulnerable. In terms of placing people into the private rented sector, we work really hard on income and expenditure, previous debts, and we're quite careful about who gets placed with what landlords, but we do have follow-up floating support that's embedded within the team to ensure that maybe some budgeting issues or debt issues are managed and don't become a trigger for future homelessness.
Thanks very much. Do you have a follow-up? Great, thank you. We'll go to Councillor Stone then, then I think, sorry Sibs, but I think we'll have to move on to the report recommendations because we're really pushed for time today.
Mine's a really quick question, and that is, are we considering maybe longer leases, maybe 2 to 5 years instead of 1 to 2 years?
That is actually something we're thinking about. At the moment, what we find is most landlords are a little bit cautious and don't want to tie themselves into the deal with the local authority, but we are working up a proposal for longer leases, so we've got that security of us being able to use the properties for longer.
Thanks very much. With apologies to members who I'm sure still want to ask questions about this item. There is always the opportunity to ask officers outside of this meeting by email or otherwise as well if you've got further questions. But I think we do need to move on now to the recommendations of the report. So I'm going to read the recommendations as before, and then we'll call for a vote. So these are the recommendations. That the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery approves the proposal to spend up to £3,493,365 gross at an estimated net cost of £2,388,380 on the expansion of PRS activities as cost-effective temporary accommodation, private rented sector activities as cost-effective temporary accommodation, and to support homeless households into the private rented sector as outlined in this report. 2, to approve the procurement of Great Western Credit Union to deliver the financial support and recovery for up to 4 years. And 3, to authorise the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, to take all steps required to procure and award the contract with Great Western Credit Union, as outlined in this report. Thank you very much. So I move those report recommendations. There's a typo that needs to be corrected in recommendation 3. Councillor Eddy, thank you for seconding. I'm going to move us straight to a vote, if that's okay. So again, could you indicate your vote clearly by hand, please? And can I ask for votes for the recommendation? And can I confirm that that's unanimous? Great. Wonderful. So that recommendation passes. Thank you very much. We'll move on next then to agenda item 9, and that's recommendations from the report Vehicle Dwellers, the Bristol Model. This report updates the committee on the proposals on the implementation of the recommendations from the report Vehicle Dwellers, the Bristol Model, which was published in March of 2024 following internal consultation. It is a non-key decision for now, but it's probably worth saying that key decisions may well flow from the recommendations contained within this report. So we are expecting that we will be discussing this matter again in future. As we've heard today, the issue of the large increase in the numbers of people living in vehicles in Bristol is a matter of great public concern. The reasons for that are varied, and the impacts of vehicle dwelling are complex. I would say that our approach to this is very much guided by the need to ensure people's health, people's safety, people's well-being. It is a vulnerable place to be, living on the curbside. We know from the report that the council commissioned into the health of people living in vehicles, that there are all sorts of health impacts which can affect people quite badly. We heard from the public gallery about some of the safety concerns as well. So it's a big concern for the people living in vehicles, and as we've heard, it can be a very big concern for their neighbours. It's worth saying that this is an issue that affects the whole of the city. So, of the over 600 lived-in vehicles in Bristol now, we think around 10% of those are on the Downs. 90% of them are in other parts of the city. And we do know that there can be a lot of stigma in the conversations around this issue, but that attitudes to vehicle dwelling vary quite a lot. In fact, in my ward of Easton, not so long ago, when the council proposed evicting a group of vehicle dwellers from a local street, neighbours got up a petition against the eviction. So there's a really wide range of attitudes towards this issue. What we're trying to do, I would say, is we're trying to chart a course that provides for better outcomes for everybody, that really sort of grasps this issue by the horns and provides a way forward that supports people with their health, with their well-being, makes sure that people who live in vehicles are able to exercise their rights as citizens, and also that they're able to move off the streets onto temporary and permanent sites, and from there we hope to be able to support people into settled accommodation as well. So the report contains a range of recommendations, and we're asking the committee to endorse all of them. And later on we'll hear as well that there will be a further recommendation which Councillor Eddy will move, and which I support. So I'm going to invite Tom Gilchrist to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you, Chair. So as you've outlined quite clearly, the purpose of the report today is to update you on the and potentially implementing some of the recommendations that were contained in a cabinet report that was brought back last year, called Vehicle Dwellers, the Bristol Model. The report is included in your pack, and there is a lot of information in the appendices, so I hope you have had an opportunity to look at them and consider some of the pros and cons for each of those options that we've put to you. I think, as
Barry has outlined, I think officers are clearly aware that the growth in the numbers of people living in vehicles over recent years has resulted sometimes in conflicting views being raised by local communities living in different parts of the city to occupied vehicles against those from local residents. This can really make it challenging to develop cohesive policies that balances the different views of local communities towards the vehicle dweller community, but also provides a fair access to services and support to those living in vehicles who want help, because not all do. But it also enables them to access appropriate health and welfare services to support them, potentially back into living in settled accommodation. There's a real difficult balance here to be struck with local councillors, with the vehicle dwellers themselves, with local communities, as we've heard earlier. And to be able to create a variety of options and solutions to try and agree an acceptable way forward as a city to deal with what is not just a Bristol problem. This is a problem that affects many local authorities, not just in the southwest, but it's a growing problem nationally of people struggling to find secure accommodation across all of England. So the proposed options are outlined and detailed in the paper, as I've said, and the appendices, and I'm happy to take questions on any of those. But I do realise there is a lot of interest in these particular topics.
Thank you very much, Tom. We'll move on now to questions and discussion from members of the committee. And I'm going to go first to Councillor Peat.
So I just want to very briefly outline a story that I was told when I was very young, when I was about 12 years old. I'd just come home from visiting my father, who lives away, so I'd got a train into Bristol, and then I decided to get in a taxi. While in that taxi, the taxi driver then decided to tell me a story, which was how he once had somebody who lived in a caravan use his services, but when he dropped him off, decided not to pay and ran off. He then proceeded to tell me how later that night he went to that caravan in the pitch of black and burned it down. This horrified me as a 12-year-old girl, and I wish I'd said something after it. But it stuck with me for the rest of my life. There are certain issues that have been discussed in the galleries today around waste disposal, perhaps a higher percentage of use of substances and things like that. But all of those things can be addressed with adequate support, permanent sites, access to waste disposal, access to mental health services. And we need to absolutely identify those who are living in caravans and vans because it's their lifestyle and they consider it part of their culture, and those who are doing it because they cannot afford to live anywhere else. And so I'm really glad with this report, and hopefully it will go a long way to easing tensions between people who live in vans and people who don't, and hopefully providing a better quality of life for those who do.
Thank you, Zoe. I've got Councillor Eddy next.
Firstly, can I thank officers for bringing this report, obviously with political backing. As the public gallery has already remarked on, this issue has plagued us, this city and elsewhere, for perhaps 10 years, and it's probably been swept under the carpet by previous administrations. Changing the metaphor, perhaps the ball's been kicked down the road and it's ended up with this administration. But I do welcome this report and the recommendations. I will come on to an important caveat in a moment, but I believe all the recommendations deserve support. They also directly come from actually the previous health survey of van dwellers, which the chairman remarked about, and it is a bit unfortunate that Councillor Goggins not here, because I know he was quite robust about wishing to raise the issue, but sadly he has to chair even fire this morning, indeed where I should be if I wasn't here. I would raise one issue at the outset. This, perhaps I'm cynical, but I would prefer to say I'm realistic. This council is very good at devising strategies and plans. Too many of those say stay mouldering on shelves or perhaps now stay in cyberspace. It does require political will to identify sites and also funding, of course. And this needs to be prioritised. And we've heard from Councillor Goulandris that we need a real meaningful timeline and we need some urgency so we deal with some of the problems which the public gallery have mentioned, of course. Secondly, I'd like to thank the over 170 people who contributed public forums statements today. Now, that's a record for us, this committee. In fact, I think it's a record for any policy committee. It even exceeds what Stephen Williams had to his public health committee back in the autumn. But the reason why people turned up and spoke so passionately is because it actually impacts upon their lives. And the people who've either purchased properties or rent properties nearby, they do that because they actually want to live near what is a treasure prize Bristol beauty spot. And it's being ruined. I have to admit that I personally found it very meaningful hearing those views. Those people in the public gallery weren't wingers. They weren't actually, as sometimes this council gets, a small army of semi-professional agitators. They were real fellow Bristolians, people who work, pay taxes, raise families, and indeed some are retired after a well-deserved time in industrial commerce, of course. So what I'm saying, we need to listen to their experience. Mr. Peter Weeks mentioned quite his experience, and as I promised Peter, I did circulate his helpful photos around the committee earlier, but though I suspect most members have seen very similar scenes in the past. So with your permission, Chairman, obviously after the debate, I would like to raise an additional recommendation, which I do not believe undermines this policy at all, but it seeks to actually balance it more by actually talking about how we need to renew our highways policy, because obviously vehicles are being parked on the public highway. We probably have to reflect that. We have actually discussed the wording. We believe it actually meets the ethos of our rightful dialogue we want to have. So I'm look forward to actually moving that later.
Thank you very much, Richard. And yes, and we've discussed this additional recommendation, and I'm very happy to support it. So I'm looking forward to moving that later on. One of the things that I think is really good to see actually is that these recommendations commanding support from across the political spectrum, from across widely different areas of our city. And I think that's a testament to the work of the officers that has gone into preparing these recommendations. I'm going to go next to Councillor Clark and then Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Chair. This is a Bristol city-wide issue. I believe that we are the second highest, have the second highest population in the country of van travellers and van dwellers, and I think that we need to put that really puts the city in context. There's obviously a number of reasons why that has happened, but I would suspect there cannot be a single ward in the city which is not affected by travellers and van dwellers on a long-term basis. And it does blights areas. I think you are really a hostage to fortune from what you've just said, because if you want to tell us the name of the road that people are welcoming van dwellers, I'm sure an awful lot of van dwellers will want to come and join them. And I seriously, you know, I've never heard of that before, and I think that's unique in the city, but I would not broadcast the name of that road if I were you.
No, I don't intend to. My ward is pretty unique in many ways.
It's a real problem, and the city has got to grasp this problem. I think that we need to be cognizant of the fact that I know in the past when I've got 3 long-term sites in my ward, which we know well about, and the council hasn't dealt with. We managed to get them removed from one of the sites, and then 6 months later, within that 6 months and 1 day, I think it might have been, they came straight back onto that site because they know the legislation, and they knew that the legislation had run out, their order had run out, and they could come straight back onto that site, and that must be familiar across the city. And this is not sustainable. It's costing the council a serious amount of money in legal costs and anguish for the officers who do a remarkable job. And I commend you guys. You know I do, because they are very accessible and are happy to work with us, but we're not getting on top of the issues here. Meanwhile, sites are a solution moving forward, but I do know of van dwellers who, from my ward experience, who say, well, we don't want to live on the edge of the city, we're happy living in Brislington, which is my ward, and we want to remain in, we don't want to be flung out to. Somebody mentioned Lawrence Weston might be a really good idea, Avonmouth might be a really good idea, and I'm sure councillors of Avonmouth were thrilled to hear that. But I think we have to be cognizant of that, and it's not a quick solution because of having to provide those services. Water and toilet facilities are going to be, a bit of an issue. But broadly, I'm in favour of the report, but I do think that we have really got to get on to the top of this, because my residents across the city are seriously affected by this. It's not nice to have excrement outside your front gate, trees being cut down in the area, all the things which are associated with it. And I just think we really, really need to get real about this situation. Thank you.
Councillor Stone next.
Okay, all right. So I'd just like to point out a few things. First of all, we've had about 15 years of austerity measures that have put a lot of people into a situation where they cannot afford, because of rental increase across the city, rents. Okay, so we have to put that in. So I absolutely commend this report on the support of addressing a situation where, 600 people in our city are having to live in some appalling conditions. And I want to just stress this, because I don't think I think there's a percentage of people that it's cultural, that they actually want to live there, and that's perfectly acceptable. There's also a percentage of people, and I think this is more than that, more than the 10% that I'm thinking about, who are stuck in the situation where they know where they are, they know where they want to be, okay, but they don't want to lose what they've got. And what I mean by that is that they know they're living in cold, damp, mouldy conditions on the side of a road, which quite frankly can get burnt out, as Councillor Peter said, which I don't think they do actually rob from people's houses, to be honest with you. I think that's a fallacy and an urban myth. They know where they want to be. They want to be in a warm, one-bedroom house with a toilet and running water and electricity and heat, so they can think and want to have a family and bring them up. But they don't want to lose what they got. And what I mean by that is that their income, and I'd like to stress one point that Councillor Eddie has said, is that they are paying taxes, because majority of them are working. They're paying taxes, like we all do. We all pay taxes. So they are paying the taxes that are recommended by the country. They don't want to lose what they've got, which is that's disposable income. And then it's really difficult when you're in a situation when you have a disposable income where you're earning money, you got about £1,000 more disposable income in your pocket, because that literally would have been what they would have spent on rent, which they literally can't afford. So I just want to put this balanced view out there, okay, so people can hear the point of view from the people that are actually living on the streets in these conditions. So I thoroughly recommend this report. I thoroughly recommend supporting people into proper housing and accommodation. So I look forward to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Yeah, no, just sort of picking up on one of the things that you said, of course, one of the things, something that we haven't heard today is the voices of the people living in vehicles themselves. And so one of the recommendations contained within this report is that we support the establishment of a vehicle dwellers voices group, so people actually have a say in decisions that affect them. I think that's really important. I'm going to go to Councillor Bales next.
It's more of a comment than a question. We've heard from the public gallery. We've had lots of questions and statements in the public forum and comments from members. My concern is that the van dweller, it's been on the radio this morning as well. I don't know if any of you tuned in, but these van dwellers are human beings, and we have to remember that. So however they arrived at their decision, or whether it was a decision or life, just they've been forced into this position. People don't want them in tents, they don't want them in vans, they don't want them in caravans. The council doesn't want to build council housing, so it feels very much like some people are othering them. And they are human beings, and that could happen to any of us, especially if you're on a low income. Lots of people live hand to mouth, and homelessness is very rarely a choice. Nobody wakes up one day and thinks, I'm going to go and live on the streets, I'm going to give up my tenancy. We have a duty of care to protect these people. So yeah, my concern is, around their safety, and as Zoe said, anything could happen to those vans, and it's not just vans that get burnt out, tents get burnt out as well. And I've done outreach with homeless people a number of years ago, and some of the stories they tell you, it quite often isn't a choice. It's happened to them, and even people on benefits pay some sort of taxes. Whether you have a home or a van, or you're a stay-at-home parent because your child has SEND, or you're caring for a relative and you can't physically go out to work, you're still paying taxes. It's in one way or another. So, we shouldn't be othering anybody.
Absolutely. People who live in vehicles are, fellow citizens of Bristol, and it's impossible, I think, to separate what's happening on the streets, on the roads around the Downs, from the wider housing crisis that we're experiencing, and that's why this council is committed to increasing the supply of affordable homes by whatever means possible, and also why we think that there's a conversation to be had with vehicle dwellers themselves and across the city about what their housing needs are, about what sorts of homes we can provide in the city at as fast a pace and as great a scale as we can. And for that, we're going to need partnership with central government more than anything. So we're really looking forward to the announcements later this year from the Affordable Homes Programme, and what sorts of support we can expect to get to really expand the supply of homes, because it's desperately needed. I'm going to move us on now to the recommendations of the report. So, as I mentioned, there's an additional recommendation that's going to be brought. I can see a hand from Zoe, though. Is there something that you wanted to add before we do that? Okay, thank you. That's great. The recommendation in the report is as follows, and that is that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery discuss the different options presented within the report and make a commitment to further engagement with vehicle dwellers across the city. And there are more detailed proposals contained within the report, which I'm looking forward to us pursuing. We have, as has been discussed, we've received an additional recommendation, which has been discussed between members and officers, and that is to review the vehicle encampments on the highway policy. The new policy will aim to reflect the changing face of Bristol vehicle dwellers, identify and service provision, and involve gained from vehicle dwellers and local communities. A further report will be brought back to a future committee. Both of these recommendations will need to be moved and seconded. So I would like to move the first of those. And thank you. And then the second recommendation to review the vehicle encampments on the highway policy. Would somebody like to move that?
Can I move that?
Can I have a seconder? Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the committee if you're happy to take both of those as one vote. Is that okay with everyone? I'm seeing nods. Great. So, again, could you clearly indicate your votes by hand, please? First of all, can I ask for votes for both of those recommendations? And that is unanimous, can I confirm? Great. Thank you very much. So, both of those recommendations pass. Thank you, everybody. Let's move on now then to agenda item 10, which is the Housing and Consumer Standards and Compliance Update. This report presents the latest update on the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme Improvement Plan.
I was going to suggest a break. It will take 5 minutes while everybody leaves.
We do have a lot of business to get through, but yes, let's have a very quick, no more than 5 minutes. So back in the room at 10:02, please, no later than 10:02.
Yeah. I was going to suggest
Yes.
I'm not rude. I'm going to say.
Just to let you know that I get picked up for the school transport at 1 o'clock. So if we run over, I will leg it. We'll be out that door dead on 1 o'clock.
To be done by 1 o'clock at the very, very latest.
But just giving you the heads up, if you see me dash out,
that's the only reason I
there's
was
not a fire
hesitating
drill.
about allowing a break.
Yeah, we seem to be doing.
We've got so much to get through, but yeah, we're
really interesting stuff.
we are currently on time, but with that break, we'll be 5 minutes behind time. The meeting. Thank you very much. If you could retake your seats, please. Okay. So our next agenda item, item 10, is the Housing and Consumer Standards and Compliance Update. This report presents the latest update on the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme Improvement Plan. There are no decisions to be taken on this report, which is for information. But I would say that this report represents one of the keenest responsibilities that we must feel as members of this council. Our responsibilities to our tens of thousands of council tenants. And that is because the report that we're about to hear is, as we know, in response to the judgment by the regulator of social housing that there were serious failings in the way that we manage our council homes, in the homes themselves, and that we need to make significant improvements in order to make sure that we're delivering a quality service to our residents, that our residents are safe, that they're able to live healthy lives in their homes. I cannot think of a greater responsibility than the one that we have to the safety of our residents. With that, I'm going to hand over to Fiona Lester, Interim Director of Housing and Landlord Services, who's going to introduce and outline the report. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of, as Chair has said, the purpose of the report today is to note and provide an update on the progress of the Housing and Consumer Standard Programme. I'd like to start just with the improvement plan. So please note the report format has been simplified to provide a new highlight report, which should make it easier to review. The programme RAB rating is currently amber at the moment to reflect ongoing challenges within the delivery in some key areas. And those key areas are namely damp and mould and also fire safety, both of which are a real focus for the Housing and Consumer Standard Programme Board at the moment. We also have some issues in relation to the electrical safety. There's been a lot of work done in this area. The electrical inspections continue to reduce, and note an increase in the electrical remedial works. So there's been an increase in the remedial works completed in this area. We've agreed to slightly revise the plans to complete in the order and date in which the electrical cases are completed. In recognition of the need to strengthen delivery, we've brought in an interim director for Director of Transformation and Building Safety, an individual called Claire Gibbs. Some of you may have met her. She's going to be with us now for the next 12 months, and her focus will really be on driving performance and delivery in this area. As we've heard, it's key for us and it's our key focus, and she will be focusing in this area and supporting the staff to deliver. Also want to point out an update in relation to performance. So we've seen some good progress in the gas servicing, in the electrical inspections, as I've said, fire risk assessments and the repairs backlog work. However, we've also seen some challenges with our fire remedial works, on the damp and mould work, as I previously said, and with our BAU repairs work. There's been additional work that's been carried out in relation to the strategic root cause work. So we held a workshop which a number of councillors and officers attended back on the 18th of January. This came and delivered four key themes, and they were identified as being the corporate approach, culture and performance, data and systems, skills and capacity. So, in summary, the Council's response to this is to pull them together into those four themes and look at an action plan that will be delivered through that. So we've got the Consumer Standards Improvement Strategy, which is the overarching strategy within which the strategic root cause activity will be captured. So please note the comments on the draft, and we aim to incorporate the strategic root cause into the findings of the overall policy. And we plan to bring that final version back to the April committee. The final thing I wish to share with you is around the Residents' Voice group. We have an active scrutiny group working in this space at the moment. Please see the summary of questions from the Housing Scrutiny Panel, which took place, and the responses to the questions that were set by that group. I just really want to share with you, finally, I attended a session this week with the scrutiny group. Really impressed with that resident group and their scrutiny, the level of understanding, the challenge and questions I found really intriguing, appropriate, and so I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with that group. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Fiona. So yeah, a couple of things that I wanted to draw out in reflection on what Fiona's just said. One is that when we, as members of this committee, took on responsibility for this area, took on responsibility for our 27,000 odd council homes, we inherited very large backlogs of repairs and very large backlogs of remedial works in such critical areas as damp and mould, as we've heard, and electrical safety. Through this programme, we are making good progress in many areas in dealing with those backlogs, which is really to be commended. I mean, this is you know, years and years of repairs which we're working through. What Fiona alluded to just now with the root cause work that some members of this committee were involved in is that we're now trying to understand the reasons that we got into the situation that we're in now. And that's absolutely crucial, because we need to be able to understand how things got to where they were when we took on responsibility for this area, in order to make sure that this never happens again. And so I think that root cause work is absolutely crucial, and it's really crucial that we as members of this committee are involved in it. I'm going to move on to questions and comments from members now, and I'm going to start with Councillor Eddy.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm conscious that the Director is introducing this report in the absence of the project manager, so I pledged to her I'd devise the most awkward, difficult question, but she's so charming, I'll pass on that. You correctly, Chairman, said this is one of the most serious commitments and obligations we have to our fellow Bristolians, and that's correct. I must say, I've been impressed with both the urgency and the seriousness of the Office of Response. Supported fully by the members, you at your chair's briefing regularly receive reports at every meeting of this policy committee. We have reports, which is open and transparent. I welcome that. And I have to say, without in any sense being complacent, I am reassured by the state of progress and the direction of travel and the timeliness of the project board and the work they're doing. One comment: I'm long enough in the tooth here to know of plenty of budget overspends and disasters, but I have to say, meeting the Savills lessons learned briefing we had just before Christmas, John Smith was there, was pretty damning to me. We see the summary of the lessons learned in the papers. I have to say, one learns, for example, that annual gas and other inspections, which we are obligated to carry out every year, stop naturally because of the extreme conditions during COVID, but never started again. That is a damning indictment. And to be fair, yourself and the leader of council have faced up to, saying we're sorry to our tenants and we resolved to put this right. But the history, it's not something which happened in 6 months or a year. It happened in plenty of time. So it reflects a national situation. It also reflects actually conditions here in Bristol in recent years. And I just think seriously, this, as you said, is one set of lessons learned we should never forget and never allow to happen again.
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. Do I have a hand from Councillor Stone?
Yeah, and I just wanted to ask very briefly, I've heard in the grapevine that it's very difficult to get contractors, especially electrical contractors to do the electrical periodic testing and also do remedial works, electrical. So I just want to make sure that we are on top of that, and if we can try and find other contractors, that'd be brilliant. That's the one question. The second question, which is really to do with, first of all, how many capped properties are there with people actually gas capped properties are there that people are actually living in? Because I'm hearing also in the grapevine that people are having their gas capped. Is that, I didn't think that was allowed. Please tell me if that's allowed or not. I thought that was illegal to cap a property from gas with people living there, so please answer that question. And my third question is about damp and mould. How many families are living in damp and mould conditions with children, especially over 12, I'm looking at the graph there, over 12 months. We still have damp and mould cases that have been in those homes for over 12 months, and we really need to be getting on top of that as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just to answer those three questions, in relation to contractors, yes, we have found that the supply chain is challenging at the moment. We've got ourselves and other landlords, social housing providers, all looking for similar trained staff at the same time. But I would say in terms of electrical and those sorts of activities, we are fine. Our staffing is fine. We've got, the pools of individuals in post. No, there isn't an issue there with electrical work. With reference to the second question, capped properties, I can give you the details on that. I don't have them now. I can take that away and get an update for you in terms of numbers. What I will say is that we do go to court where we need to do a gas force entry if that's necessary. Sometimes systems can be capped where there isn't use. Individuals are only using partial gas, and residents will be aware of that. That is not necessarily illegal, but we have all of that data, and I can provide that data for you after this meeting and other members. And thirdly, in relation to damp and mould numbers, individuals with children and the numbers that we've got, I can give you that data as well. So lastly, I think I'd like to add, in relation to this whole piece of work in terms of the Housing and Consumer Standard Programme work, one of our key issues initially is around that data piece, understanding what you have, and that's the thing that we've become much better at. So if you'd have asked me this 12 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to give you that data. And that's the challenge for us. We're still not there. We still have a lot of work to do in that space, but that's the key for this, is understanding what your issue is, and only once you understand that can you then start to do something about it. So I can get that data for you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Fiona. Councillor Clark next.
Thank you. It was really just to clarify part of Councillor Stone's question, because capping gas supplies may mean you've got an electric cooker, you don't need your gas supply to your cooker point. It could also mean you had a gas fire and you don't have a gas fire any longer, so you've had it capped there, and it's entirely different from having your boiler capped because your boiler has become dangerous. So I think that question needs a lot of unpicking and unpacking, because I think really, I don't want to put words into anybody else's mouth, let alone a councillor. That would be dangerous beyond belief. But obviously we need to really get clarification if we've got any residents in the city where they haven't got access to suitable heating, i.e. their gas boiler and hot water. And that is really the issue for us, rather than gas fires and, you know, electric cookers being replaced after having gas ones. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Fiona, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Absolutely right. Yeah, thank you very much for that clarification. I've got nothing to add. You're absolutely right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Bales, and then we'll have to wrap this item up because we are a little behind time now. Councillor Bales.
I wanted to ask about staff training with contractors. So even if it's outsourced, are they trained? Do they have DBS checks? Because I'm very aware of a situation where contractors let members of the public into a tenant's flat without their knowledge, and then packed up all their equipment, and the repair didn't get done. So that shouldn't be reflected on the tenant. They didn't let them in. So is there any training available to make sure things like that don't happen?
So thank you, Chair. Whilst I can't comment on the particular situation, what I will say is that all contractors will go through our procurement routes. They will have to provide evidence to demonstrate appropriate checks and qualifications of the staff that are working on their behalf, on Bristol's behalf. And in terms of our own staff training, absolutely, there's an holistic training piece that takes place for them around customer service, around equalities and diversity, around a number of factors, and that respecting a resident's home, which is key. But if you would like to, Councillor Bales, if you'd like to share the details of that particular case, I can look into that for you at some point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move us on to the recommendations now. But one thing I wanted to say is that it's clear, I think, from the external report commissioned from Savills that Councillor Reddy referenced earlier on, that one of the reasons for our council homes being in the situation that they are is that historically there was not enough focus and attention paid at the highest political levels to the safety, the decency of the homes that our residents live in. We cannot be complacent. It's incumbent on us to make sure that this programme is a success. We've noted that it's currently at an amber RAG rating. This, I think, demonstrates the huge scale of the challenge that we have, and I think it demonstrates why it's so important for us to maintain focus and maintain accountability on this work, and ensure that we're investing in making sure that we're providing safe, decent homes to all of our residents. So with that in mind, I'm going to move to the recommendations, which are that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery note and comment on the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme Improvement Plan Summary in Appendix A1, I guess. Note and comment on the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme Landlord Compliance Programme, Combined Backlog and Business as Usual Performance Report in Appendix A2. To note and comment on the Strategic Root Cause Review Report in Appendix A3. To note the update on the Consumer Standards Improvement Strategy. To note and comment on the Residents' Voice actions and feedback from the Housing Scrutiny Panel. To note and comment on the update from the latest regulatory review meeting with the Regulator of Social Housing. To conclude this item, I'd just like to ask the committee to note the report as per the recommendations set out. Thank you. Next then, agenda item 11, which is the Homes for Bristol Interim Affordable Housing Delivery Plan for 2025 to 27. And with thanks to Councillor Eddy, who needs to leave for another appointment now, I'd like to advise the committee that this report seeks approval to adopt and implement Appendix A1, which is Bristol City Council's Homes for Bristol Interim Affordable Housing Delivery Plan for 2025 to 2027, and to continue the use of the current Affordable Housing Funding Policy 2022 to 25, which is Appendix A2, and the Affordable Housing Funding Policy scoring criteria in Appendix A3 through to 2027. This ensures alignment with the proposed Homes for Bristol Interim Affordable Housing Delivery Plan for 2025 to 27. This is a key decision as the proposal affects more than 2 wards. So this report seeks to lay out how the council is going to ensure the delivery of affordable housing across our city in what are incredibly challenging conditions for the delivery of affordable homes, and does so in a way that makes the best use of our own resources and our opportunities for partnerships with registered providers, with national government combined authority and housing delivery organisations across the city. I'm going to invite Louise Davidson, Head of Housing Delivery, to introduce and outline the report now.
Thank you, Chair. So this report seeks the approval from Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, as Councillor Parsons just says, on 2 fronts. The first is to approve the Homes for Bristol Interim Affordable Housing Delivery Plan and its associated delegations, and the second is for a 2-year extension of the current Affordable Housing Funding Policy, which remains unchanged other than being updated to reflect the new committee structure. The Homes for Bristol plan is an articulation of the Council's continued support for affordable housing delivery in the city, and explains what we and our partner providers can do to maintain a programme of delivery. It is a 2-year interim plan reflecting the significant changes we are expecting at a national, regional and local level around the policies and funding that drive housing delivery, including affordable housing. Not least the progress of our own local plan, changes to national planning policy and expected announcements around the Homes England Affordable Homes Programme and other funding for social housing landlords in the 2025 spending review. Many Homes and Housing Delivery Policy Committee members joined the Housing Delivery team in 2 deep dive workshops last autumn and helped shape the plan. And members are reminded that the plan has been developed in close collaboration with a wide range of both internal and external stakeholders. The Affordable Housing Funding Policy was approved in March 2022, and it has proved very successful in allocating capital funding to registered and community-led housing providers. The associated scoring criteria framework that was introduced with the policy has given us as an authority a fair and clear mechanism to allocate grant to a wide range of organisations to further drive affordable housing delivery for the city. The policy, really importantly, has allowed us as housing delivery to passport funding from other service areas to registered providers to provide specialist affordable housing units. And most recently, that has enabled us to passport the government's local authority housing fund money for refugee resettlement to 2 provider partners to enable them to acquire properties in the city. Both the Affordable Housing Delivery Plan and the Affordable Housing Funding Policy enable the Council to provide a robust housing delivery service that continues to support and promote affordable housing delivery for the city. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Louise. Thanks very much. And yeah, I think one thing that I'd like to remind the committee of before moving to questions and comments is that, as Louise said, this plan has been co-designed with a wide range of stakeholders, including the members of this committee. So your fingerprints are on this plan. You've all had the opportunity to contribute to it and shape it, barring the members who are substituting today. But yeah, I think that is really a very important part of this plan. I think this is something that we as members of this committee have had the opportunity to shape. And with that in mind, I'm going to go to questions. I think we had Zoe first.
Thank you. So I suppose one of the questions or concerns that I have is that we seem to be very much relying on social housing to pick up the slack where we cannot. But social housing companies don't have infinite funds. In fact, I would say that they have less funds than we do. And so my concern is that if they are having to take over projects that we said we were going to deliver but we're no longer going to deliver, does this not divert their investments away from the projects that they've already agreed to?
Louise, would you like to?
No, yeah, fine. Happy to answer that one. So I think, Councillor Pete, we have a huge range of organisations working with us in the city delivering affordable housing, from some major national RPs with very extensive and very deep pockets, and we have some much more local organisations who are very committed to just working within Bristol. And what the plan seeks to do is show to those organisations that we are a place that will support them in housing delivery, and particularly at a time when they, the same as us, have challenges about where they invest their money. Is it about housing stock improvement, same as we've just spoken about? The plan says we're here, we're open, we want to support you, and we are going to bring all of our resources to bear to make us a really, really good, positive place to deliver affordable housing. And I think what we're doing, and the message we're getting back from our provider partners, is that they want to work in Bristol. They're continuing the development programme that they already have. We're not seeing a dilution of that. And what the plan seeks to do is open that window for a continued pipeline. So I think we do have the capacity, and as the plan says, it's to maintain what we've got in the very short term, and to set us up for a much longer housing delivery plan as part of a broader corporate housing strategy in the longer term. So I hope that does answer your question.
I suppose I'm just very concerned that, with the 76% of cuts of 76% of our house building programme, it's just a lot for that sector to take on board, and I'm just concerned that it's a lot for us to give up, and it's a lot to expect others to pick up.
Would you like me to pick up on that, Councillor? So I think the way we've always seen delivery in the city, it's been about two different arms of delivery, and again, the plan hopefully articulates that. It's what our RP partners bring, and it's what we can do, and it's what we can do together. Currently, we are not seeing a downturn in the RP interest in the city, not in the same way as some other places. So no, I'm not concerned that if we are not delivering those schemes, that we're going to see a downturn in housing delivery in the city in the short term. Nationally, and in a longer term, we know that there is a challenge about affordable housing delivery, and it's one of the things the plan talks about. And we do need to see that announcement from government about funding. And we need to work more closely with Homes England and with the West of England Combined Authority, with our developers, and just generally more in the round to support our RPs to deliver for the city and identify the need. We've been in an amazing period of growth for affordable housing, 1,800 homes in active delivery in the city. It's our job to see how we can sustain that, but to recognise what the challenges are to do that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. I've got Councillor Bales next, and then Councillor Stone.
I think you can probably preempt what questions I'm going to ask. So your plan is to deliver 12,000 homes, affordable homes, by 2040. You've cancelled the building of 2,300. How does that correlate with the 800 that you're going to dispose of?
I think there's a fear here that we are not muddling, that's the wrong word, but we're trying to conflate lots of different housing agendas for the city. So the high figure you quote, that's our local plan policy agenda. That's where the new local plan is seeking to deliver and say what the housing needs. We do have a challenge at a local authority level about how we then meet that. The local plan policies that we're looking to bring in start addressing how we will deliver homes through the planning agenda. We then have all the other issues and challenges that we have to deal with on sites that aren't delivered necessarily through the local plan. So I think we need to take away and unpick through the action plan here and through our housing strategy and through the HRA disposals policy and business plan, how this all comes together for the council as one clear agenda. But trying at the moment to bring all of those two into a sentence today, I think, is really hard.
Do you have a follow-up question?
Follow-up. I'm very aware of the outcome of the big housing conversation. I know that was quite a while ago, but that, you know, people wanted council housing. They still want council housing. So I'm just really concerned that people's views are being ignored. I mentioned earlier about being othered, you know, that you know, people want council housing, and you know, that big housing conversation, you know, that was a revelation. It kind of told everybody what we were already thinking.
Kerry, I think John Smith would like to come in at that point, but I mean, one thing I think I would say is that we are continuing to deliver council homes. That's one thing that's very important. We are also continuing to deliver a range of other homes through our Gorham Homes arm, and we're delivering a maximum possible number of affordable homes through all of the activity laid out in this interim affordable housing delivery plan. So we are doing the absolute best that we can with the resources that are available to us. I make absolutely no apology for the fact that within our housing revenue account, the money that comes from primarily from our existing tenants' rents, we currently need to invest a considerable amount of money in ensuring that those tenants are safe. And in order to do that, we need to make some difficult decisions about what the future pipeline of council-owned housing looks like. But that does not mean that we're slacking in any way our ambitions for delivery of homes that are available through home choice, that are available at local housing allowance, that people on low incomes and in housing need can have access to. So, you know, I think it's really important to sort of make sure that we understand that we're prioritising both things, and we have to prioritise the safety of our existing residents, and we also need to do whatever we can, pull whatever levers we can to deliver affordable homes for social rent at scale. In order to do that, we really need central government to step up. We need the Labour government to step up with affordable homes funding at scale. We need to be able to work with Homes England and our other partners to deliver those. I'm going to go to John next. In a sec, I'll go to John next.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted, if with your agreement, to come back to some of the numbers that the councillor referred to earlier around disposals, just if that's okay. So, Councillor, you referred to the disposal of 800 homes, which was a discussion in relation to the HRA business plan that we had at the Strategy and Resources Committee, Chair, you probably remember, and obviously it's going to full council soon. So I just wanted to come back to that. So the number of disposals planned, and I've got my colleagues here to correct my numbers, I haven't got them in front of me, Councillor, but the number of disposals planned for next year is 14, and the number of new build houses that we're talking about is well over 100, isn't it? So I just wanted to make that point. The net position is an increase of more than 100. I think the following year, the net position was an increase of more than 200. And the 800 figure is if you assumed that 28 houses were disposed of each year for the following 30 years. I just thought it was helpful for everyone to have that in mind. I think that's what you meant, wasn't it?
Thanks very much.
Over a 30-year period, yeah.
One more question, Kerry.
Some of the comments you made. Well, what could be safer for tenants than building new council homes? Because when we build them ourselves or for Gorham Homes, you know, we build them better. It's been in the papers this week that Elim Housing, they have to dispose of some of their flats because they were really poorly built. So what could be safer than us building them ourselves?
I mean, I think it's. I think it's possibly a little unfair to our registered provider partners to suggest that they somehow provide less safe homes than the ones that we do, but certainly we are continuing to build very large numbers of homes through Gorham and through our own direct house building program. So we are building homes at the scale that we are able to, and we're looking to accelerate that by any means possible. I'm going to go to Councillor Stone next.
Okay, yeah, so first of all, very quickly, if we dispose of our reasonably well-built council homes, then we actually are not embedding the carbon that we really do need to embed. So we need to upcycle, recycle and reuse our council homes. So we need to make sure they're safe and warm and comfortable, which we can do, and it will actually be much better for the environment. However, my questions are really about the scoring criteria. You know, so I've been looking at the scoring criteria that we've been using. I think we've been underselling ourselves because some of the past that you have to do is quite low. Like only 30% affordable housing, you get 1 point, you pass. With sort of social value, I think it's out of the scoring, I think it's out of 5, you only need to get 2 and then you pass. So how can we really, I suppose in the way, asking for people to build our homes, which is great, how can we actually get the most benefit out of those? Hence more sociable housing, hence more social value, hence more of these things that it feels too low.
So I think the scoring criteria you're talking about is when we are looking, and we're doing very little of it now at the moment because obviously capital budgets are different. When we are looking at using capital funding to help subsidise an affordable housing scheme, it's a very, very small sector of that delivery. And the scoring criteria was there to particularly help us if we had a limited amount of money to help assess the quality of different bids. And it was sort of well thought out, and it has worked, and it has enabled us to go, you know, that bid here is better in the round than a bid here. And it's helped us to sort of prioritise how we spend our money. And it is nowadays, it's a very relatively small amount of actually the delivery we see in the city because our capital funding for affordable housing is that much limited. That might change. We look at using that scoring criteria and the allocation scheme to help, like I said, other service areas to allocate any of their funding. We've got some work around some of our older persons and specialist housing to come. It is proving a useful tool, but in the overall numbers, it's not the driver for delivery, if that makes sense.
Thanks very much. We are well over time, I'm afraid, for this item. So I'd like us to move on, if possible. I've got time for I think two more. So I'm going to go to Zoe next, or would you prefer?
I just wanted to address the fallacy of either we build lots of houses or we build safe houses. That's a completely false dichotomy and could be addressed differently, but when we look at the budget and everything. So just wanted to get that clear.
Okay, thank you, Zoe. I'm not sure what was meant by that, but let's move on anyway. We'll go to Councillor Stone just for one final point.
I just wanted to make a point. First of all, we've got. I wanted to make the point on modular build. Okay, so modular build houses now, a lot of modular building has actually collapsed recently for lots of reasons. They've gone bankrupt. The reasons why they've gone bankrupt, and I want to make this point, is that they can build modular homes really quickly in their warehouses. But if we can't deliver the land and the planning, then what happens is that those modular buildings then have to be stored. And they get stored for a very long period of time and then they go bankrupt. So what we need to do as a council is that we need to make sure that pathway is open and viable so that we can get these modular buildings onto our land, building amazing passive house units for people who need them.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, completely agree. Right, let's move on then to the recommendations of this report. So, for the clarity of the committee, the recommendations are as follows. That the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery approves the Homes for Bristol Interim Affordable Housing Delivery Plan 2025-7 as set out in Appendix A1 and endorse the approach being taken. That it approves the continued use of the current Affordable Housing Funding Policy in Appendix A2 and the Affordable Housing Funding Policy Scoring Matrix in Appendix A3 through to 2027. This ensures alignment with the proposed Homes for Bristol Interim Affordable Housing Delivery Plan 2025-7. Number 3, that the committee authorise the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, subject to securing the necessary funding from whatever source, to take all necessary steps to implement the various work streams as detailed in the Interim Affordable Housing Delivery Plan, including procuring all necessary goods, services and works contracts and other agreements, and agreeing terms for any relevant property disposals or acquisitions, notwithstanding that any of these may, whether by value or otherwise, comprise a key decision. To authorise the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Section 151 officer, to secure and utilise funding to support the Interim Affordable Housing Delivery Plan 2025-7 and the Affordable Housing Funding Policy 2025-7, including authority to agree the terms of any grants, including those in excess of £500,000. Number 5, to note that the appointment to the new post of Executive Director for Housing will necessitate the Executive Directors agreeing the reallocation of the above delegations. Number 6, to authorise the reallocation and rearrangement of the above delegations from the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration to the expected Executive Director of Housing, due to be appointed as required in line with the updated scheme of delegation. I move those recommendations. Can I ask for a seconder, please? Seconded by Councillor Stone. Thank you very much. I'm going to move us to a vote now. Can I ask members to clearly indicate your vote by hand? First of all, can I have votes for the recommendations? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Great. So those recommendations have been passed. And we're going to move on now to agenda item 12, which is procurement of the new fire risk assessment contract. This report seeks approval to procure a new fire risk assessment contract. This will be undertaken in line with the guidance from the Procurement and Contract Management Service. It's a key decision as the proposal affects more than 2 wards. And I would like to invite Claire Matthews, Programme Lead for Residential Building Safety, to introduce and outline the report. Claire, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm here to present the report titled Procurement for the new fire risk assessment.
Yeah.
Oh.
There we go.
Right, thank you. I'll start again. So yes, here to present the report titled Procurement for New Fire Risk Assessment Contract. The building safety team are responsible for ensuring the fire risk assessments are completed for all Bristol-owned buildings as required by the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order. The current contract with our fire risk assessment supplier is due to expire next month, and we are seeking approval to undertake the procurement exercise to award contracts with 2 suppliers moving forward. Benefits of undertaking this procurement surround having 2 contractors. At present, the council rely on the service from 1 contractor for this. However, with the 2 contractors, we can create competition between them and ensure good performance. And if performance were to drop with 1 contractor, the council have an alternate to place additional surveys on and ensure compliance and safety can be carried out. A further benefit of the procurement exercise encompasses enabling the council to reduce any peaks and troughs in delivery of the programme through having the increased capacity with 2 contractors. This will in turn enable consistency in the delivery, but also a further benefit of this procurement exercise will be to ensure the highest competency and quality of assessment in a very high profile area. We will do this by ensuring the procurement exercise incorporates requests for contractors to be accredited by an independent fire safety registration body. This independent body undertake checks to ensure the businesses are following specific guidance and have adequate cover for liability, for example, and skills to complete fire safety services. Further to this, we'll also request that any fire risk assessors who are employed by the contractor are members of the Tiered Fire Risk Assessors Register, which is implemented through the Institute of Fire Safety Managers. To obtain membership to this register, each fire risk assessor is required to provide details of their experience and evidence of qualifications, for scrutiny to that panel to ensure the competency of that person. So approval is therefore being sought to procure and award the contracts for the new fire risk assessment companies, alongside an extension of 6 months for the incumbent contractor to ensure consistency, transition to the newly procured services, and continue the delivery of the fire risk assessment programme to ensure compliance with legislation and keep residents safe. So I'm now prepared to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. Now, this strikes me as a very comprehensive, thorough report. I'm hoping that having read it, that members will agree with me that that this provides us with the opportunity to secure the services of reputable and qualified fire risk assessors to ensure the safety of our residents. Does anyone have any brief questions that they would like to ask or any clarification they think is needed before we move on with the recommendations of the report?
Just thank you for writing the report.
Thank you, sorry. In that case then, and thank you to members for your brevity, I'm going to move to the recommendation for the report, and that is that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery approves number 1, authorisation for the Executive Director Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee to procure and award the fire risk assessment contract and any subsequent extensions or variations in line with the procurement routes and maximum budget envelopes outlined in this report. And number 2, authorisation for the Executive Director Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee. I think that's the last time I have to say that phrase today. To extend the existing contract by up to 6 months. I move those recommendations. Can I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Councillor Peat. Fastest finger wins. Great. So, as before then, please clearly indicate your vote by hand. First of all, can I have votes for the recommendation, please? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. So that recommendation is passed. Thank you, Claire. We are galloping towards a conclusion then. And agenda item 13 is the 2024-5 period 9 finance forecast report for the HRA, the housing revenue account that is, and general fund housing. This report presents the Housing and Landlord Services financial forecast at period 9 against the approved 2024-5 budget. There are no decisions to be taken on this report, which is for information. So I'm going to invite Fiona Lester, Interim Director of Housing and Landlord Services, to introduce the report. Is there anything that you'd like to say before moving on to Martin?
Well, thank you, Chair. I actually wasn't going to say anything. I didn't know I was being asked to say anything, but I will leave this to my colleague, Martin.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Saving the best till last. So, as the Chair's indicated, the Period 9 Finance Update reports on the revenue and capital forecast positions of both the General Fund and the HRA. The overall position of the General Fund revenue is shown a forecast overspend of 3.4 million and an underspend on capital of 4.2 million. The HRA revenue forecast is shown a budget overspend of 12.4 million and capital underspend of 0.7 million against a revised budget of 146 million. That budget has been revised down from the original position of 350 million. The reason for the forecast over and underspends are detailed in the report, and I will take questions on them later. However, whilst the main report focuses on the forecast position at a point in time, it doesn't provide any commentary on the movement and direction of travel between reporting periods. The presentation, which I can see isn't on the screen, I'll just wait for the presentation to come up, sorry. Thank you, Rose. So the presentation takes account of previous feedback from committee members. It details the movements between the periods. So just before I get into the analysis, just to briefly explain the format of the presentation here. The top part of the slide shows the total movement in the service area, and the bottom part of the slide is the analysis of where within those services the movement has occurred during the periods. So on general fund revenue, between period 6 and 9, and sorry, I should also explain we are looking at period 6 and period 9 because period 6 was the last report to come to committee in December. So between period 6 and 9, the overall movement in the forecast on general fund revenue is an increase in the overspend of 0.5 million. 0.1 million of this is a number of small movements within housing options, housing solutions and housing delivery, with the most significant movement of 0.4 million being within private and accessible housing services. This relates to an increase in expected income that was reported at period 6. However, as this income related to future years' licensing, it should have actually been classified as a receipt in advance and not all reported within the current year. So this has been corrected between period 6 and period 9. On general fund capital, it's a total reduction of 3.8 million in the forecast. Private housing has seen an increase of 1.4 million as we anticipate additional funding will be made available to help us meet increasing demand in this area, and a reduction of 0.2 million reported against the Refugee Resettlement Fund. This is as a result of difficulties experienced in finding a partner to help us deliver these units and provide the necessary support services, though that issue has now been resolved. The Housing Delivery Programme is forecasting a reduction in spend of 5 million by the end of this year. It's mainly slippage in the programme, with the Philwood Public Realm works have seen further delays of 0.6 million, and Bath Road have also seen further delays of 0.6 million as a result of a negative land release fund decision. Hengrove is experiencing delays due to planning consent, which has given rise to 2.5 million being moved into the next year. And finally, grants to registered providers is seeing 1.5 million slipped into future years for the Turner Garden, Constable Road and Astry sites, which are being delivered by community-led housing organisation. There's a small balance of 0.2 million made up of various other overs and unders across multiple projects. Can we go back a slide, please, Rose? Thank you. So, HRA revenue is forecasting to see an improvement of 1.8 million in period 9 compared to period 6. We're expecting 0.4 million increase in repairs and maintenance as a result of the dilapidation settlement with the Holiday Inn, which arose as a result of the Barton House evacuation. This increase is offset by 0.4 million saving within supervision and management, as we expect to see a lower outturn than previously forecast on costs related to the consumer standards work. A further reduction of 0.6 million in electricity costs within special services, and a 1.1 million reduction in net interest payable, as our borrowing costs will be lower as a result of the in-year exercise to balance the capital programme, resulting in lower borrowing requirements. Year-end balances are also expected to be higher, which will generate more investment income. On HRA capital, as just mentioned, an exercise was required in year to rebalance the capital programme as a result of the impact on borrowing ability of the large revenue overspends being experienced. All capital projects were reviewed and assessed against deliverability and priority. As a result, significant amounts were reprofiled and slipped into future years, and the Baltic Wharf development was removed from the programme. So, in summary, taking all of this into consideration, whilst the HRA has seen an improved forecast position, the interest cover ratio remains well below the minimum level of 125% and is currently sitting at 41%. Due to the nature of the pressures being experienced this year, a significant number are expected to carry forward into next year. As a result, the HRA needs to generate £8 million worth of savings in 25-26 and £10 million in 26-27 in order to maintain its reserves and allow borrowing to fund next year's capital programme. Whilst the 25-26 business plan is compliant, it is not resilient. There's a little bit of headroom of 1.4 million against the ICR in 25-26, but only £17,000 in 26-27. If there were to be another unforeseen incident or planned savings fail to materialise, this would have a significant adverse impact on our ability to maintain a sustainable position that allows us to invest in our housing stock. That's the end of my delivery, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Martin. Conscious that we only have 10 minutes left of the allotted time for this meeting, so I'd like to ask members to keep any questions or statements really brief if you can. But I think, I think Martin's presentation really sort of demonstrates the very, very challenging financial situation that we find ourselves in, and in particular with the housing revenue account, which has in previous years not been such a focus, I think, of political attention. I think it's really important to understand that the financial sustainability of our housing revenue account is really difficult at the moment. And that's one of the things that these figures really bring out. Going to questions or statements then. Councillor Bales.
You don't have to answer this now well, we don't have time, but you can send me the information. But the report mentions Walwyn Gardens, and I know that that was quite a controversial development and because of costs, and it almost didn't happen. And tenants were on the news, and it was very, very controversial, and it's been going on for a long time. So I just wondered how close to completion it is. But you don't have to answer that now. You can send me the information if you want.
Councillor Bales, thanks for your question. Fiona's going to answer that.
Thank you, Councillor Bales. I'll take that away and get you an update and get that sent to you along with the other response.
Thanks very much. Do we have any further questions or comments? I'm not seeing any hands, for which I'm very grateful because we are really short of time. So I'm going to read out the recommendation of the report, which is that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery notes the report on the P9 forecast, the period 9 forecast for housing and landlord services. And to conclude, I'd like to ask the committee to note the report as per the recommendation set out. Thank you very much. We'll move on then to agenda item 14, which is the Q2 Performance Management Report for 24-25. This report sets out performance against the Bristol City Council business plan as relevant to the remit of this committee for Q2 of 24-25. Ask members to note areas of specific interest or concern to review progress with relevant directors. There are no decisions to be taken on this report, which is for information. I'm going to invite Nick Smith, who is Strategic Intelligence and Performance Manager, to introduce and outline this report. Nick.
Thank you very much. And I'm aware we're racing to the finish line here. So, the key thing is that it's a Q2 report. It was sent, it was sent to councillors for information. The dashboard was before Christmas, so the data has been out there for quite some time. And just for information, Q3 is coming to the next of these meetings at the beginning of April, and the Q3 dashboard will be shared with councillors next week. So more information will be coming. Other than that, the cover report is as is on screen, as shared. It comes with Appendix A1, which is the dashboard, which has got all the data for everything in the business plan, including for this committee. And that does have a metrics over time button, which I think is very useful for looking back at the long-term trend for individual metrics. But the details of the metrics for this committee are in the Appendix A2, which is embedded within the committee reports. And as you'll see in the cover paper as on screen, or just a couple of pages down from that, there's half a dozen points that we'd highlighted in particular.
Thank you very much, Nick. Can I suggest that if members have any questions or comments on performance or risk, that we leave them until the next item? I'm going to read out the recommendations in this report now, if that's okay. Great, thank you. So the recommendation is that the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee notes performance against the business plan relevant to this committee, including the issues raised and measures to address performance issues to be implemented by relevant services. Can you please indicate that you note the recommendation as set out? Thank you. Thanks very much. So, our final item, item 15, is the Q3 24-25 Corporate Risk Report. This report provides an update on current significant strategic risks relevant to the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee. The risks relate to achieving objectives set out in the Council's Corporate Strategy 2022-27 and summarises progress in managing the risks and actions being taken as at Q3 of 24-25. There are no decisions to be taken on this report, which is for information. It says here that I'm to invite Fiona. Fiona Lester, Interim Director of Housing and Landlord Services, to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you, Chair. Conscious of the time, we have limited time. So just to say to members, please review the items within the Corporate Risk Register. And just to note, as was mentioned earlier on, biggest risk, number 28, is the risk around the housing and consumer standards work. So just want to pull that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. And in the dying moments of our time together this morning, this afternoon now, in fact, does anyone have any questions or comments on that report? Thank you very much. All that remains for me to do then is to read out the recommendation, which is that the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee notes this report. So I'd like to ask you to note the report as per the recommendations. Thank you very much. With thanks to members, to officers, to those who attended in the public gallery and those who, for all I know, may still be watching online, I'd like to conclude this meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely weekend.
Happy Valentine's Day.